Hello Builders! Sunteți curioși să vedeți cum a fost ediția din acest an a How to Web? Știți deja, acel eveniment mare care aduce în același loc developeri, fondatori, investitori și oameni pasionați de tehnologie și inovație. Evenimentul s-a desfășurat pe durata a 2 zile pline de energie, idei și inspirație, iar eu am surprins pentru voi câteva momente care sigur o să vă inspire. Pentru început, vă las câteva secvențe dintr-un panel foarte interesant, unde speakerul de la OpenAI a vorbit despre cum putem transforma hype-ul în jurul inteligenței artificiale în valoare reală pentru companii.
Founders that I work closely with that I found have had a lot of success are the ones that will go in and make sure that they're tied to a key stakeholder at the leadership level and have them be really involved in the POC and the pilot from day one. Those are the folks that are going to choose individuals that might be levels down from them to actually be directly involved and then become those champions to push and deploy that product out a lot more broadly. But having that direct tie to someone that impacts their bottom line, their numbers, how they think about revenue, how they think about projecting out for forecasting, that's where I've seen it goes from a pilot phase or some sort of POC to actual full rollout.
Sure. And we talked a lot of signals of something going right. What about when it's going wrong? When do you know that it's time to abandon an AI project or pivot to something new? There are red flags that you can look out for.
I'd be curious to hear yours from experience.
I mean, there are a few early warning moments, and since AI is such an exciting technology, when working, let's say, with industrial partners, there's the effect of this new shiny thing. Where, let's say, leaders from a company, they are also measured in their ability to attract and place in a company AI topics. They get budget, they get rewarded for that. Unfortunately, this leads to the fact that some startups, solution providers, get attracted to participate into innovation cycles of big companies. And you kind of become that instrument for that person to make a career in a company based on, let's say, vitamin pill instead of a painkiller. An early warning system is the moment where you think you have customers, but your customers attract your product into placing it into innovation venues in the company, but you don't actually deploy at scale. That's very, very dangerous. Another one is, again, not hitting rollouts. I mean, everything's driven by the market. If you're not able to release it, then you're going to have to pivot.
Do you see any red flags yourself, Alice, quite commonly with the startups you work with?
Maybe not as much of a red flag, but putting more of a positive spin on that. Like the green flags where I'm like, they're going to be successful is when they can really move fast with speed and intention. I think there's a lot of noise and making sure you know what to focus on and to block out some of the other noise. And then when you're not, there's no ego tied to the tech that you've built as well. As labs, as new technology gets developed, being okay with letting go of some of the code, which can be really tough, but in the long run, making that switch now is the right thing to do and will solve a lot of headache in the future. Those are the ones where I think are of us green flags, and then I guess the ones where I've seen and have concerns around are the ones that have look at it from the other direction.
Sure, brilliant. We've talked a lot about what works today. Perhaps we could briefly look into the future. Which trends or applications in AI, maybe if we could just stick to one each, are you most excited about that are emerging at the moment and might make it big in the next 12 to 18 months?
I was just saying, I think there's a lot around agents, multimodal, etc. Personally, very excited to see what happens more on the hardware and robotics side. There's incredible startups and ideas coming out like ATH Zurich from that when I speak to folks in across Europe, across the region, a lot of excitement to get hands-on with some of the newer, smaller models, the open source capabilities that really allow for more of a hardware robotics push. And I think that's probably the space you guys are operating somewhat in, so I'll let you touch on that a bit more, but I think that's where I'm more excited to see what happens. There's going to be a lot that happens in multimodal and in agents. Very excited about voice, Sora, etc. But I think longer term, beyond the next 12 months, that's where I would keep my eye on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only agree. I mean, in our space right now, probably the next frontier is deploying visual language models on the shop floor. It's something that generates real value and something that also raises quite a bit of complexity, because I mean the research has produced these brilliant topologies that are quite heavy though, and packaging them and deploying them in such a fashion that they can run on embedded hardware in a factory is not necessarily trivial, will come. If I go beyond the, let's say, next 12 months, and I also look at the volume of data that, at least in our case, has been accumulated in terms of processes and what's happening on the shop floor, then physical AI definitely is the one that takes the cherry on top. So not only telling people what problems they have, but solving them through automation. I know that AI as a technology allows one to build something very, very fast. And I really think that one should not build a solution in search of a problem, but if possible, solve a problem.
I would say probably the same, and I think I've said a lot of it and just reiterating, but know what you're solving for, know what the problem is, solve for the workflow, not for a team, a department, a specific kind of function. Think a bit bigger picture, and then have an understanding of what you want the broader organization to look like, or the broader company and enterprise business to look like in not just the next 12 months, but 5 years, 10 years down the line.
Vă las și o prezentare practică despre cum AI a redefinit modul de lucru într-o echipă de ingineri, de la procese mai rapide la o colaborare mai eficientă și o nouă cultură de echipă.
Organizational performance when platform quality is low. So the importance of having a DevOps function, a platform function, is really important. Then you have BCG going on the record saying 30 to 50% enhancement in performance and efficiency. That's kind of what you can shoot for right now. And then the state of AI in business in 2025 was released by MIT, very recent article. I think it was mentioned in the panel as well, if I heard. There's 30 to 40 billion of investment in Gen AI that has been done, but only 5% of that 30 to 40 billion is integrated in AI pilots that are generating significant value. So there's a clear mismatch between the promise that is out there and the real impact it is driving in the field. So I want to give you a look at how we transformed internally. So this is going to be a real story, and I'm going to start with a bit of a failure, if I'm honest. So when we started rolling out AI, and this is pretty much a year ago, a bit over a year ago, we rolled out GitHub Copilot. And essentially our tactic was, I think it's going to adopt itself. That was more or less what we thought was going to happen. The reason we thought that was going to happen is because, and there's lots of engineers here in the room, these engineers, they tend to be early adopters of new technology. So they were using these tools at home. Some of them were doing side projects. As engineers, we love our side projects. Some of them were doing startups on the side, and they were all using that new technology. So we assumed wrongly, that those same engineers that were doing that at home, they would actually be using that in their day-to-day job if we just provided the right tool. So when we started looking at the data, and I have the data here up on the screen, that's the monthly active usage pretty much a year ago, so in March, April, and May of last year, the monthly active usage showed that 60% of our engineers were not using the AI tool. So that means they were either not transforming the way they were working, or they were using tools that we did not provide, which is also a real chance. So we definitely heard stories about using Cursor and using some of the other tools that were out there already that we did not really provision. So it was very clear that thinking that it was going to adopt itself was not the right strategy. So I brought the team together in an on-site, and this was somewhere in January, February, where we decided that we need to give a very clear mandate towards the teams. And this is actually a screenshot from the post that we did after we did that on-site, where we needed to make it very clear to our teams that it is absolutely a must for us as a company. And Schopad right now is a profitable company. We do about 100 million in recurring revenue, profitable company. It is a must for us to be at the cutting edge of AI-assisted productivity, and we need to do that not just in engineering. It's not an engineering problem. We need to do it across all of the functions. Analytics, marketing, product, design, all of them really need to rethink how to work using AI and to become more productive with AI. I think the large difference with augment code is the amount of context that it can take in. So the big difference is that you're not looking at just a single file, but you're able to take the full context of a large repository, and we do have large repositories. We have some monoliths out there as well if you are an older company. So that becomes a large code base, and you need to understand the mental model for that whole code base, and Augment is really able to do that. The second one is that on the code review side, again, we went through a selection. Être.Două was one on the list. Ultimately, we went for CodeRabbit. CodeRabbit is now embedded in our GitLab CI/CD pipeline and does embedded reviews right there, even creates merge requests automatically. So quite exciting. I think the most important thing is to share some of the experiences that we had, the tangible stories that came out of each of those. So I want to start with one that, I don't know if are there Angular developers in the room, front-end developers? Yes, well, that's from Schopad, so yes, some more, yeah, fantastic. So you'll probably know that going from an Angular 10 towards Angular 19 is not a simple task. So we had a legacy tool that was still stuck on an older version, Angular 10. It was a smaller code base, but the team first assessed, and this was a full team effort, it's going to take us more or less a week to go from Angular 10 to Angular 19 because you have to go in small steps, and it's a lot of pain to go through everything that breaks once you do that kind of upgrade in package.
Și bineînțeles, nu putea lipsi o discuție despre viitorul AI. Speakerul de la AVS a vorbit despre cum agenții inteligenți pot planifica, executa și adapta singuri acțiuni complexe, un pas important spre autonomie reală în sistemele AI.
The employee will see the bot response and can choose to either pass it directly through to the user or to override it. You get the immediate benefit of live data and how your system is working. And you also get an employee productivity boost as well. And as soon as you reach the threshold for answers being accepted, you can go on ahead and let the bot talk directly to the customer, that chatbot that Dan wants. But of course, this bot right here, all it can do is answer questions based on its training data, which, despite being all the data in the world, probably won't give us the answers we want. So once again, we're going to add in our own knowledge base, something you just saw here in the last talk called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. And we also want to get those natural conversations, those back and forth, and so we're going to have to add in memory. Because large language models don't come with that built in. What you're actually doing to get a very natural back and forth conversation is sending in the entire conversation each time, or a condensed version of it. And so as your conversation goes on, you're seeing it get longer and longer. So you do need to test conversations as well as single questions. And so now we've got a pretty fancy chatbot, but actually it's really just a very, very fancy FAQ page. And Dan wants us to do so much more, right? He wants it to be able to file claims. So now we really do need an AI agent. And so we bring one in, and in an agent, the LLM not just is used for the understanding of language, it's also used to reason and make decisions. And we put a system prompt on. And that gives some instructions and sets the goal for the agent. Now, just setting a goal is obviously much more flexible than having to sit and write down a set of rules for a workflow. It allows it to do really complex or highly personalized versions of the workflow, but it will need a more sophisticated model than you needed just for question answering. And so our final piece, of course, is what you just saw, tools. If it's going to be able to act, it's going to need to be able to access things. For a claims chatbot, that's probably things like the documentation, the customer and policy database, the ability to write to the claims database, and so on. And those tools are going to make your agent so much more powerful, because it's going to be able to do things. But remember, it's going to be able to do things. So don't give it too much access to everything. And so now we have a bot that can not only answer questions, but also when the user comes in and says, hey, I was in an accident, it can reason that what the user actually wants to do is to file a claim, and that it needs more information. It can ask for it, then it can go ahead and look up the documentation. It can then go, okay, I need the policy information. I have a tool to look that up, but I need the policy number in order to do that. Let me ask the user for it, and then call the API, and so on and so on. But that thinking adds up quickly. Every single one of those thoughts is a call to the model. And that will start to add latency and cost. And so you need to be aware of that when you're building an agent. Back to Dan's agent. So far, it does a few things, but Dan wants it to do a lot more. And that means that agent is going to have to basically have access to everything. It's going to have so much power. So what Dan and I are going to sit down and do, because this is getting super risky, and the instructions and the goal are getting super complicated, and we have to have a bigger and more sophisticated model, is to break down the agent into multiple specialized agents. Each of those agents now will have its own clear goal, only the set of tools it needs. It can share those tools, but each of them can be developed and tested completely separately. And a problem with one won't affect the others. And so, not only do we need to modularize our business functionality, we need to modularize our agents. We can reuse them in different ways, we can keep our risk low. And not only that, but now we can use different models for different agents depending on what we need, and we can further optimize our system. So please, do go and embrace innovations, new technologies, bring in the most exciting stuff, but make sure you're doing it in a way that is evolving. Make sure you're building your systems now so that they're open and agile, and you can bring those things in. Now, there's so much more I didn't cover, so please do come and talk to me afterwards if you would like, but let me leave you with a few links. First of all is a link to some real-life use cases, so you can go and find a business like yours, see what they're doing. Secondly, if you want to get hands-on, here's an agent workshop that's going to show you how to build kind of production-ready agents. And finally, if you're interested in some of the tools that we have at AWS for generative AI, that final link is going to take you to a walkthrough of a use case.
Închei cu aceste idei care sper că v-au stârnit curiozitatea și inspirația. Dacă vreți să participați și voi la următoarea ediție, să vedeți cum arată viitorul tech la propriu, găsiți mai multe poze și detalii pe pagina mea de Instagram. Pe curând!